This is Open to Hope Radio, featuring Dr. Gloria Horsley and her daughter, Dr. Heidi Horsley, coming to you on behalf of the Open to Hope Foundation, dedicated to those who are looking for hope after loss. Now, here's Dr. Gloria.
Welcome to the Grief Relief Show. I'm your host, Dr. Gloria Horsley, with my co-host,
Dr. Heidi Horsley. Our guest today is Dr. Sharon Wesch. Dr. Sharon Wesch is an author, teacher, and spiritual healer and has 30 years of experience dedicated to healing grief. It is her sole mission personally and professionally. A pioneering spirit, she created a holistic center and has traveled internationally teaching spiritual healing. She is the author of Connected for All Time. Welcome to the show, Sharon.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here. I started calling myself the story magnet because wherever I went, after I set an intention to write these books, people would come up to me in an airport, or one time it was in a bar having a drink late at night, and they would just start telling me their story about the loss of an infant and how they begun to heal it. And so one night, on a Saturday night at 11 o'clock in California, I got out my tablet and started writing this woman's story. It was like that for a period of 10 years. I spent 10 years collecting these stories and writing these two books.
Well, they're amazing stories. And as I said at the beginning, it is, close to Heidi's heart, right, Heidi?
Absolutely. I love that you did this because I have had 2 miscarriages, and they were early. They were in the first trimester, Sharon. And as you know, people don't know you're pregnant, and you've told very few people, and those that you have told usually don't realize the significance of your loss. I mean, in my case, and I know that this has probably been the case in many of the stories that you've heard, not only did I mourn the death of my pregnancy, but I mourn the death of the future I thought I was going to have.
Exactly. And it's usually a secret grief because the woman hasn't told friends or family yet about the pregnancy and and people don't know how to respond when you've lost a baby, even a baby to SIDS. People don't know what to say. It's such a traumatic event, and people's hearts hurt so much about it. And I'd also like to say to people who have not lost a baby that if you read these books, there's so much wisdom, and you can substitute the word husband or brother or sister in place of the word baby and get the same information about healing your own grief if it isn't about a baby.
How can I know that there's signs and messages? And if I want to get signs and messages, how can I do that?
Mm-hmm. Well, the most important thing to be able to do it is to raise your vibratory frequency. I teach meditation, I teach spirit communication, and the whole idea is that our loved ones in spirit and the angels and our spirit guides all live in a higher vibration. So if you're busy with your everyday routines and your mind is in that active mode, you really won't get any communication. But if you can sit in prayer or sit in meditation or set an intention that you'd like to recognize the signs, that's a beginning step. And then you also need a lot of information. Book 1 has a list of 12 different kinds of signs and messages, and also talks about angel visitations and dreams. The most important kind is a visitation dream. And what happens in that is the spirit of your loved one appears and begins talking to you, and you feel like, when you wake up, you feel like this really happened. I was really there, and there's a sense of joy in your heart because you've had this connection with your loved one. It could be a spirit baby, it could be a father, brother, sister. I have a twin sister who passed away about 8 years ago, and I dream of her probably every couple weeks. And often there's a light around the people in the dream. You come back with this sense of connection and filled with love. And it's also very important when you have one of these dreams how you interpret it. I'll give you one of my clients that I write about in the book. After her baby died for months, she was having this dream, and in the dream she was rocking her baby, swaddled in a blanket in a rocking chair. And she could see herself doing that, and there was a light around them. And when she was actually looking at the rocking chair and herself rocking, she felt very peaceful. But then when she woke up, she would feel filled with pain because she was yearning to rock that baby for real. So these dreams would be upsetting to her instead of helpful. And then she told her best friend that this was happening, and her best friend said, "Oh, that's terrible. You should make yourself stop having these dreams." And so then she felt worse. And when I started working with her, I said to her, "Oh, that's your baby coming to talk to you. That baby wants you to know that she still exists and that she's with you. And this could be a very healing time for the two of you. You never got to rock her in the physical. So in the dream, you're rocking her in spirit. And the light means you're on the other side doing this together. And it's wonderful. I suggest to all my clients and the readers in the book that you find a like-minded person who will support you in telling your stories of spirit communication, who also have their own. And the two of you can be supportive to each other, because some people are very critical of this. In the work that I do, I want to shift people from dealing with grief at the human level, at your personality level, or talk therapy, because that will help a little bit. But when you have lost a loved one, whether it's a baby or an adult, there is a wounding to your soul. We call it soul loss or soul wound. And talk therapy and reading books about grief and so on will not heal that soul wound. What heals it is opening your heart and connecting with divine love through prayer, connecting with a message or a sign or a dream from your deceased loved one. And when you have an experience like that, it lights up your heart so that the pain is gone and you have the joy of connection. I want to read you a quote that one of my mothers in book 2 talked about. Her name was Mary, and her baby only lived a couple days from a congenital heart problem. And 25 years later, she learned about spirit communication and meditation and so on, because she had a diagnosis of cancer. But she was doing automatic writing, and her baby, Gregory, came through. And by this time, he's a wise old soul. He's not a baby. And he says to her, "I guide you whether we talk or not. Your soul and mine are connected for all time, and we are communicating whether you are conscious of this or not." So that's a basic premise I have. That's my hope for all of the people that come to work with me, is that they can establish that. Most people think, everyday people think, well, if you get spirit communication, that's wonderful, but it's a one-time thing, or it was magic, or that they can't do anything to make that happen. And the truth is, you can do things to make it happen. You can learn to meditate. You can learn to work with prayer. You can learn to recognize these certain signs that are probably already happening.
A lot of clients come to my office and don't recognize the signs, and they have a lot of dreams. They don't recognize that as visitation, or, and there's signs out there all the time, but they don't recognize them.
One of those on my list is finding things like coins or a feather, and it could be a specific coin like a penny or a dime or a quarter. And each time you find one of those, what you need to do is kind of look up into spirit and say, "Oh, thank you, baby," or "Thank you, sweetheart." My mother's been gone 10 years, and the other day I was calling different relatives, and as I hung up from one, I thought, I think I'll call my mom. And I was like, wait a minute, I can't call my mom.
Yeah.
But because I was thinking of her in that way, I think she was around.
Yep.
It can be something simple as that.
Right.
One of the mothers in the book would see a little glimmer of light off to her right side, and it was always on the right side. And for years, she didn't know what it meant. And then she finally began to understand that glimmer of light was the spirit of her baby. And of course, she'd see the glimmer out of the side of her eye, but when she really looked, there was nothing there. But usually when you're getting that kind of little glimmer or smell, you'll get a sense of chills through your body, or sometimes people call them angel bumps.
What are the gifts of tragedy, and how do we find them?
Okay, well, you find them by listening to the inspiration that comes to you. I often think guidance comes from our deceased loved one on the other side. And a gift can be as simple as one of the stories in the book, there's a young mother who lost twins, and the father of the twins had been quite abusive to her, emotionally abusive, and I don't think they were actually married. But one of the things she got inspiration from the spirit of her babies was, you deserve so much better. You do not need to take any more abuse. And within 3 months after their death, she split from this guy, spent a year alone, and then found the love of her life who treated her with the most kindness and respect. And she considered that a gift in the tragedy. That if she hadn't had the babies and gone through the loss, she wouldn't have been inspired to make her life better. Another gift could be that many of my mothers in these stories, after they've healed their own grief, they feel inspired to do something to make the world a better place. Like one of them became a support group leader in her community for other women that lost babies. Another one, she had a long stay in the hospital with her baby in an intensive care unit. And she's become an advocate for what parents need when they're in that situation. And she's actually teaching at conferences all over the world now about the needs of the parents when their children are critically ill in the hospital.
Wow.
So if she hadn't gone through the long time in the hospital with her baby, she never would have been known that experience and then been inspired to do it.
Yeah.
So, and in my own life, my first deep experience with death was my own father. And at that time, I was a math teacher. I was in my late 30s. Had no expectation of becoming a psychotherapist or a grief healer or energy worker, any of that. But because of my dad's death, I went into grief therapy for myself, fell in love with the process, changed careers. Then 8 years later, my mother-in-law died, and I had an experience of spirit communication with her. Just fell in love with all that process of spirit communication, read every book I could find. So for me, the gift in my grief about my dad was to become a therapist. The gift for my mother-in-law was to get involved in spirit communication and healing at the soul level.
Right.
So it's like that. It's like you have an experience, and as you're working through it, you find some love, something that you want to do the rest of your life. I have a website for the grief books. It's called connectedforalltime.com. I've been doing spiritual healing by phone for at least 20 years. I had created a process called Radiant Heart Healing, and I wrote a book called The Radiant Heart. And for 10 years, I traveled all over the United States and Europe, and some in Mexico and some in Canada, teaching a process I call Radiant Heart Healing. I use the Radiant Heart work for grief, and I have healing grief. I have a 4-step process. The way I work with it is to see grief as an energy. Like when you walk into a room and you feel like you say to yourself, there's a tension in here that you could cut with a knife.
Right.
What you're sensing is the energy of discord or the energy of anger, because they were probably arguing before you walked in, and you can feel that. Same way you can feel the high energy of love at a wedding or in a church, or you can feel the low, slow vibration of grief. It's heavy in your chest. Sometimes it's heavy all over your body. So I teach people to release the energy of grief, send it out using visualizations and imagery work, and if I'm right with them, pulling it out with my hand. And once we have cleared that, it takes maybe 10 minutes or so, then I have them visualize white light coming in the top of their head and filling their whole body, and particularly their heart space, with the white light. So whenever you release something you have to replace it with something good. It's pretty a simple principle. So you fill it with white light, and in that process, often people are raised in their vibration to a level that right in the session they will have an experience of believable spirit communication. And I love it when that happens. It doesn't always happen, but I'll give you a short version. I was working with a young woman in her early 20s. She'd lost a baby like 2 years before. Her mother-in-law referred her to me. Her mother had taken my Radiant Heart classes, and she came not knowing what she was getting into. She'd never read a spiritual book, nothing. She didn't even want to talk about this baby. So I brought it up and kind of pushed the issue and described what I just said about releasing the grief energy, bringing in the light, and she was able to visualize, thank goodness. So we did that process. And then I'm holding her heart space with my hands and visualizing the light, and all of a sudden she says, "Oh my gosh, I'm seeing this vision." And I said, "What?" She said, "It's a little boy with blonde hair, and he's got on little shorts and a red shirt and tennis shoes." And I said, "What's he doing?" And she said, "Oh, he's just running around, laughing and playing, kind of running in circles, and he's so happy." And I said, "Well, I know you don't understand this right now, but that's your baby. Your baby died 2 years ago. This little one looks 2 years old. They grow up in spirit on the other side. And he's showing you this image so that you can understand he's happy now. He's healthy now. There's nothing wrong with him." And when she got it, that that's what it was, she just wept out of joy, not out of sadness. And then she said, "You know, my son, who was 5 years older when he was born, keeps telling me that he sees him."
Thank you for being on, Sharon. Well, thank you so much for listening to the show today, and God bless.
You've been listening to Open to Hope Radio, hosted by Drs. Gloria and Heidi Horsley. Like today's edition, all of our past programs are available on demand at opentohope.com, along with helpful articles, videos, resources, and links to help get you through the toughest time of your life. You can also follow us on Facebook and Twitter and sign up for our monthly newsletter. Again, that's opentohope.com. Check it out today. Then be sure to stop by next Thursday at 9 a.m. Pacific Time when we'll be posting another edition of Open to Hope Radio. Remember, others have been where you are. They made it through, and you can too, as long as you're open to hope.